Welcome to this month's TheatreQs. Today is a very exciting episode, but before we get into the interview, let's start off with a fun fact. Now, to preface the fun fact, I'll tell you that my guest today is playing 4 upcoming shows, July 16th through the 20th, at 54 Below, a cabaret club in New York City. She's previously sold out the club, so she is back by popular demand. However, some theater lovers may not be familiar with the history of 54 Below, which has been dubbed Broadway's living room. Let's learn more about it, shall we? As per the Roundabout Theater, in 1927, an opera house opened in New York City. The location of what was later known as Studio 54 transformed into many things during its time, including a theater, a nightclub, a television soundstage for the Johnny Carson show, a disco club, where the name Studio 54 came from, and a rock concert venue. It is now the location of the Roundabout Theater Company. But beneath the former Studio 54 is 54 Below, which opened in 2012 as a Prohibition-era styled cabaret for Broadway performers. According to the New York Times and 54 Below, the cabaret is owned by Broadway producers Richard Frankel, Stephen Baruch, Mark Routh, and Tom Vertel, who recently co-executive produced Back to the Future on Broadway. The 4 owners recruited Tony Award-winning lighting, sound, and set designers to design the space. Since its opening, it has hosted performances by Patti LuPone, Norbert Leo Butz, Tony Danza, Jonathan Groff, Alan Menken, Lin-Manuel Miranda, Chita Rivera, and many others. The cabaret was recognized with the Tony Award for Excellence in Theater in 2022. How about that? I bet you learned something new today, and you'll certainly learn more from my guest. You may know her from her 6 years on the Here's Lucy show, Who is the Black Dahlia, or her numerous Broadway appearances, from there playing our song, My One and Only and Lost in Yonkers, to, recently, the Broadway cast of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels and the Broadway and touring companies of Pippin. Her experience in the industry is immense and unmatched by many. Lucie Arnaz, welcome. Hi, Miss Arnaz.
Hello, good morning, or good afternoon,
Good morning.
where you are an hour away. Are you in Tucson?
Yeah,
Okay, so it's still good morning to you too.
still good morning, yep. So, jumping right in, introduce yourself and some of your career greatest hits.
What? Introduce myself and do a career hits, say my own bio. Is that what you're asking me to do?
Yep.
Why? Don't you normally do that? No? You want me to say
Well,
what it is?
just some of your favorite, some of the favorite things that you've done.
Favorite. Oh, okay. Well, that's different. Okay, well, are you ready?
Sure.
Okay, hi. I'm Lucie Arnaz, and you might know me from television a long time ago on the Here's Lucy show and the Black Dahlia TV movies. You may know me from Broadway, Annie Get Your Gun, They're Playing Our Song, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Pippin. You may know me from television producing, the Lucy and Desi home movie, 50th anniversary I Love Lucy special, and 16,000 other television and regional and Broadway productions. Google me. You'll see.
So, what was your first memory in the entertainment industry? Because obviously, you grew up around your parents and the I Love Lucy show. So, what was your first memory of being in that industry?
Well, yeah, being in the industry, that's an interesting question because when you grow up with parents who are in a certain kind of business, whether they make shoes or shows, that was clever. Um, you don't know that they're in an industry. You just know they're doing something. And if you see them doing something they like doing, I guess you take away something about that. Like, oh, my father always comes home so happy, when he's done his work today. Or my mother really looks like she's having a good time doing that. As opposed to parents who schlep in and say, ugh, the day, this place I work, oh my God, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that is, you don't probably gravitate towards that. As I got to be in my teens, maybe 11, 12, 13, I was more aware that there was a business called show, and my mother was giving me little tryout parts on the show that they were doing, on the Lucy show, it was called then. And I liked it. I had a good time. I liked pretending I was a different character than myself. So I guess it was around 11 or 12 by doing those little parts on the show that I was aware that this was an occupation people had, you know, other than my folks, because I was too young to connect it on those terms. They were just, they worked. They weren't home a lot. They
Mm-hmm.
worked somewhere and then they came home, you know.
Sure. Yeah. And then your first leading role in television was Here's Lucy, right? Which came after the Lucy show.
Yes, the first time I had an actual uh, part that was not just a one-off, but I was a series regular. Was on the Here's Lucy show, and that was for 6 years. And then I started gravitating into other venues, like getting a job in another dramatic television show, like The Sixth Sense or Marcus Welby, MD, or those shows. I got little parts in doing that, and then I went off from there and did regional theater immediately.
So, what was it like to star alongside your family members in Here's Lucy?
You know, it's always it's such a generic thing to say something like "What was it like?" Because like what specifically, you know? Otherwise, it's a thesis question. I would take hours to answer. Like is like so generic. You know, I'm it was good, bad, and great, and fabulous, and horrible, and all the things being next to your parents all day long, or your mother or your brother can be fabulous, annoying, wonderful.
All the things.
Well, we're working with family, and the good thing is, they were all very good at what they did. You know, my brother was talented. He knew how to read lines. He knew how to play music. He knew how to dance and sing. And so the things they threw at us at that show, um, he could do. It wasn't embarrassing to be on stage with him. And my mother was that woman. You know, she was great at what she did, and she was a wonderful teacher. But she was also a mom, you know, so sometimes when she told you to do something in front of other people, you didn't feel like the star of the show or the producer or whatever was giving you instructions. You'd had to fight the impulse, you know, to go, Mom, you know. So it does influence a little bit, but I stayed 6 years. I had a great time. If it hadn't been, you know, useful and beneficial to me as a performer and as a person, I think I would have left early, like my brother did. He was only there for 2 years, and then he went off and did films and things. But it was a great training ground for me. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier how after Here's Lucy, you branched into more dramatic TV and then eventually into theater. What was your first experience in theater?
I went and auditioned for a regional production of Cabaret at the San Bernardino Civic Light Opera. It was the first equity production, which is the union for theater performers. And, you know, I had a little bit of a leg up because I was in a television series. And that's the business of show. If you have a name value of any kind, they're more apt to want to cast you because they think they'll sell more tickets that way, right? And I'm sure it didn't hurt that my name value was connected to you know who.
Mm-hmm.
And you know who. Ooh, who's. I had two who's in my corner. And but I did, you know, I did an okay audition, and I thought I did well enough playing Sally Bowles in Cabaret. It garnered me a few other auditions, and then I was off doing summer stock every time we had a hiatus from the show. But that was the launching pad, Cabaret, Sally Bowles.
And then, so that was your first theater show, and then you went on to make your Broadway debut in, was it in They're Playing Our Song, right? The Neil
First
Simon
Broadway
musical?
show that I did was They're Playing Our Song, right? Marvin Hamlish, Neil Simon, Carol Bayer Sager lyrics, Robert Klein. Pretty good for
And
a
that was
first go.
yeah, and that was nominated for Best Musical at the Tonys. So you're almost immediately upon entering the Broadway scene surrounded by, you know, these really fantastic people. How did they help you grow in that initial experience and across your entire time on Broadway?
Wow, so much. There's chapters here, whole chapters in a book someday. But I'm going to see in a nutshell. Marvin, the first thing that comes to mind is Marvin Hamlish, who, as you may or may not know, was just this prolific, almost savant musician who wrote phenomenal melodies and it was a fantastic arranger. He did most of the arrangements for Barbra Streisand, uh, for Liza Minnelli, and when she first started out. But more than anything, he was a great accompanist and coach, kind of what should you do, how should you sound, where should you place your voice, and things like that. So when we were rehearsing for their playing our song, he said something to me so valuable one day. Um, we were rehearsing one of the ballads, and he stopped and he said, I think I have to, I might want to lower the key here for you. I had been working in summer stock and regional theater where when you did a Broadway show, you got the music from the original Broadway show sent. There were no computers
Hmm.
back then. You didn't hit a button and change the keys that everybody was going to sing, what your high notes and your low notes are going to be. If you didn't hit the note that the original Broadway performer sang, you wouldn't get the part, right? So I was used to doing that. I was used to hitting everybody else's, trying to sing where they sang. And I'm singing around this song. And when he said that, I was devastated. I thought, oh God, no, Marvin, no, please. I know I can. I tried to convince him, oh, I can do this. I can
Hmm.
do this. And he said, wait, hold on. What do you think? I'm married to these notes? For God's sake. He said, listen, I chose you because of the sound of your voice. Your voice is unique. And every instrument is different, Violins aren't piccolos, piccolos aren't harps, harps aren't oboes. You have to respect the instrument that you were given. That blew my mind because I had spent most of my life in high school and regional theater trying to sound like somebody else, maybe trying to fit in a place so I could sing that, so I could do that. And that he gave me permission to be my voice, to have my voice, and have somebody like a Marvin Hamlish want to write a song for that voice and put it in the key that was best for that voice. It opened up a whole new perspective for me. And I think it was the first time that I was able to actually say, oh, I'm a singer, as opposed to I'm an actor who sings.
Yeah.
That was important. And Neil Simon was just so brilliant on so many levels. I can't even tell you. I mean, he was humble and not, in real life, I guess in business, not so humble. But when he was dealing with his own writing, you would think as the writer, he would be all full of himself. And it's my way or the highway. These are my words, make them
Hmm.
work. A lot of writers are like that. Almost all of the ones I've worked with, other than Neil Simon. And one day we had a really tough time staging one of the scenes. We tried everything and it just wasn't working. It wasn't funny. It wasn't nick, nick, nick. And he was sitting in the back of the rehearsal room and he was chewing on his glasses like he always does and giving this look like, and I was scared. I thought, oh boy, I'm going to get fired. I know it. I'm going to get fired. And he got up and he left. And he came back the next day and I thought, here we go. And he came back the next day with all new pages
Oh,
and he
really?
handed them out. And we tried to stage the same scene with the new pages, the new dialogue, and it staged in a second. And we went,
Wow.
whoa, what, just a couple? And he said, when it's that hard to stage, it's always the fault of the writing. That was pretty cool. So having Neil Simon admit something like that and be willing to tweak, to change, to give was a great, great lesson. Um, and then just in learning how to be with other performers, the whole company, Manny Eisenberg, our producer, Phil Kuzak, our production stage manager, the way you have to have a sort of, it takes a village detente for this little family to work together day in and day out, not get on each other's nerves, not step on anybody's toes, don't tell them how to do this, you're learning the democracy, how you work together in a theater company per se. And there are rules. There are things to know. There are ways to behave.
You mentioned your singing, and I was listening to your album live at the Purple Room the other night, and
Yes.
it's fantastic. It sounds amazing, and the selection of songs is great.
Thank you.
Of course, but I was wondering how you've maintained your vocal health through your career.
Great question. Great question because I've had only one or two vocal coaches throughout my life. One that was in my life for a very long time. And he taught me the basics, really basic stuff about how to breathe and where to place the voice when you're singing and follow through and edge and arc. And they're simple little things that you can forget in 3 seconds. And we worked on songs for years. And it seemed like every time I brought him new material, he was telling me the same stuff. And I thought, why is it taking me so long to learn this? And he goes, it's just habit. And it's a bar exercise. And if you don't sing every single day, because I don't, I'm like, all over the place. I have a very diversified portfolio. I'm singing a lot, then I'm not singing. And then I'm in a show where I'm dancing a lot and I'm not singing. Or I'm producing and I'm not doing any of those things. Or, I'm all over the joint. But I have to just remember the few little things that he taught me and don't abuse the voice. Like if you're going to be singing, then take care of yourself. Don't go out, don't go to a baseball game and scream for the team. Don't drink a lot of booze. There's certain things you just know you don't do. And you try to listen to the various people who give you little tips every now and then. There's a way to place your voice, the mask that's in here, and steam when you feel a lot of glurge in your throat. You can get there's so many great steamers out there. Just let it clear all of that. And having said that, I hate to talk about this too much because every time I tell how it works, somehow something will happen and I'll get a cold and there goes my voice. So it's like some sort of voodoo, I don't know, magical stuff. I will say one thing though. There was a time when this same gentleman who was my coach, I won't mention his name because he has since become very, I don't know, arrogant like other people too, where he was charging so much money for these classes that real singers could never study with him ever again. He was used to talking to corporate people about, giving speeches at their meetings and stuff, so they were paying him thousands of dollars an hour. This is ridiculous. And then he came back to regular singers and tried to do the same thing, and I was like, yeah, no one charges that. Not even the most expensive, entertainment attorneys don't charge that per hour. So I don't work with him anymore. But, he used to come to my shows, and then after the show, especially if he knew I had another show, like the next night, he would give me pages of notes. Oh, and you hit that note, and don't forget here, and then when you get there, don't forget that, and when you did that. It turned out that I was singing and thinking all about those notes all the time. When I finally said adios to this fella, and I started just I'll keep the 4 things he was teaching me for the last 42 years, whatever it is. I'm going to do those. I think my voice got 100% better because I got out of my way. I stopped thinking about it all the frickin' time, and just do the basic stuff you're supposed to do. And so I think that was very healthy. Take what these guys can give you and then say goodbye. It's not brain surgery.
Well, so how do you, because I've worked with people, who are very much thinking actors. How do you escape that? How do you, fully embrace the character without thinking about the note that the director gave you the night before?
Oh, no, different. Notes from directors about a scene. If you get a note from your director the night before and you implement that, absolutely. It's a completely different thing. Notes from a vocal coach on every other vowel and syllable in the 13 songs you're singing, that is counterproductive, let me say. But no, with directors, you absolutely take their notes. I mean, that's what your job is. And if you have a problem with what they tell you to do, you argue with them about it a little bit. There are some directors who just don't give good notes. They don't know what they're doing to begin with, and then now you're doing defensive acting, where you really have to just know this guy doesn't know this woman, this fellow, whoever doesn't know what they're talking about. And I've had several of those people. And the cast looks at each other and basically says, "Looks like we're on our own here, guys," because this person is clueless. And that's a shame when that happens because you want advice. You want ideas. I mean, we once worked with such a terrible director on a new play that was being staged that Joyce Carol Oates wrote. She had never written a play before. I don't think she's written one since. And there's good reason for that. It needed a lot of help. And I was in it, and she hired a friend of hers to direct it. And he was so terrible. He was such an awful director that the cast decided to trick him just to prove what a terrible director he was. And he would tell us to do something, and then we'd be in the middle of a scene and we had this planned, and so we would say, you wanted me to come in from over there, right? And then cross and go up and then whatever. And they'd go, yeah, 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 that's right. And he hadn't said anything like that. We just made it up and to get him to say, oh, yeah, 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 like he was paying attention, because he never was. And he was never helpful. So we got him fired. The whole company said, we're not doing anything until you get rid of this person, because you'll never get this play on. He needs to go now. And they brought somebody else in who tried to make the play work. Play didn't work much anyway, but you know. But usually the Michael Bennetts of the world, the Robert Moores of the world, Jack O'Briens of the world, they're fantastic directors. And you just pray they tell you what to do, and you do it, you know.
What are the characteristics that you look for in a good director, when they're doing blocking, when they're trying to stage a show?
Well, I wish I could say that what I look for mattered, because generally you get a part and the director is the one who hires you, so you don't have anything to say about looking for a director. But if you mean how do I know
Yeah.
when it is a good director, yeah, there are people who seem to understand what the script is about and who those characters are and what their motivations are. What do they want? What do these characters want? And help you get there. And they're traffic cops too, sure. How are you going to get everybody on and off the stage in a believable way? How are you going to rehearse this show in a certain amount of time to open when they say you're going to open? I did Annie Get Your Gun at Jones Beach in New York, which is outside it's out on the bay, it's outdoors, 8,000 seat amphitheater on the water, and it was to be all summer long, and so it was this big extravaganza. And they hired a lovely, lovely man. Dick Barstow was his name, and he had directed the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey circuses, so they figure he'll be good for this big production, Annie Get Your Gun, Jones Beach. Well, he was in his late 80s, I think, or mid 80s, but anyway, second day of rehearsal, he had a stroke.
Oh.
And they didn't do anything about it. They didn't want to replace him because they thought, oh, he'll be fine. And the producer didn't do anything. Nobody did anything. And he would just sit there and kind of look at us and nod. And we didn't know he'd had a stroke. So he's all nice. And we're saying, okay, so should we break up into groups? Do you want to run these scenes? Should the choreographer take the dancers and because the director's job is to say, all right, you go take the dancers, run that second dance. I'm going to work this scene. He's the king of the castle. He's the captain. He never said one thing. So finally, my leading man and I had to start doing that. Okay, and every night before the rehearsal, we would go home and decide what we were going to rehearse next day, and what we was told the choreographer, you're on your own, buddy. You make your own schedules. Whatever you need to do. We'll run the acting rehearsals, and you tell us when you want to, and then we'll have to get. So we basically directed the whole play. And he still got credit for directing the show when he had a stroke and just couldn't speak, basically. So you never know what's going to happen. But good directors come prepared. They know what the show is about, and they talk an actor's talk. They talk your lingo. They know how to tell you what to do. They give you good examples of, for instance, what if you can see this as a time in your life when, oh, yeah, for example, I've been a director. I directed the first 3-week lab workshop of Hazel, which is a new play going to Broadway, new musical going to Broadway. And I had a sense of what that's like to control, 27 people on stage, dancers, singers, books, musicians, blah, blah, blah. The director is asked every single question. All the departments come to the director. Should we do this? What do you want this? What size these do you want? How about the costumes? How about the... You're like this all day long. So you better be ready. You better have done your homework on the piece. And the directors who come prepared and have done the homework are fabulous, And there's a lot of good directors. There are way more good directors than bad ones.
This is something that I've always been curious about. What's the difference between workshopping a show and directing a workshop of a show versus directing the actual Broadway production?
Oh, enormous. Oh my God. Well, first of all, money. Start with that. Workshop is when you think you got something that might be good, but you need to put it up on its feet and see. So first, there can be a reading, well, like a workshop. The first workshop we did of Hazel was simply a staged reading. So we did it with, music stands and a very small band, and we rehearsed the music with everybody, and we ran through. Everybody had their books in front of them, and there's that. And then you evaluate how did it sound? Where were the laughs? Did the audience that we invited, did they get it? Did they like it? And then the composers and the librettists, they go back and they make their changes if there have to be. Then we got into the 3-week workshop, which is instead of 6 days for the reading, it was 3 weeks. And so that costs more money, and you have to pay for the space and the musicians and whatever. And I directed that, and it's cast. There's casting involved, just like in a Broadway show. But they know they're in a test run, right? And you get it up on its feet and you make it work the best you can under the circumstances. It's like one step more professional than the reading. And again, a big audience will come in. Maybe you'll do 3 performances. And then the creative team will evaluate again. What do we need to change? What didn't work? Broadway, you come with a way bigger budget, and people have signed on for longer periods of time. The salaries are way higher. What you have to pay to rent places is much more. So there's a lot more riding on that. And you want to make sure that you've hired the people who are going to get you to the finish line. So you usually end up hiring people that, can put butts in the seats, or designers, arrangers, whatever, that can take your little baby and make it shine. So it's the difference of night and day. Broadway rehearsals are also much longer. They're Playing Our Song was only 3 weeks,
Oh, really?
which is crazy, from start to finish in a brand new show with changes being made all the time. 3 weeks of rehearsal and about 4 weeks of previews in Los Angeles. And previews are the hard part, because that's when they're changing things right and left underneath you. And you're doing a show at night, and meanwhile in the daytime you're rehearsing all the changes or the fixes, and some are going to be cut, but they're not cut yet because they got to go write it or make a new arrangement for the song. So that night you go back and do the scene as you did it, but you have all the changes in your head. Oh, that's a mind blower. And it's expensive. I'm sure they spend a lot of money changing shows, changing musical arrangements. And at least it was a lot more expensive back when we did They're Playing Our Song, because again, now no computers,
Yeah.
right? So whenever you would change something, you couldn't just go, boop, 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 I'm changing this, cutting that. There are all these, they had copyists, they were called. I don't even know if they exist anymore, because computers do it. But there'll be 8 or 9 of them up in the balcony at the theater we were rehearsing in. And every change Marvin and Carol wanted to make in the music, they had to go up and redo each note for each song by
Wow.
hand. And we had like a 20-piece orchestra, so there's 20 different, instruments to change it for. And then we might try that new thing with the full orchestra for a night, maybe 2. And Marvin and Carol will go, no, you go back to the original. Whoop! The Witches of Eastwick, when I did the Witches of Eastwick in London, Cameron McIntosh produced it. Huge, big production. Huge. And we rehearsed for 4 months.
Oh, wow.
4 months! Because we had flying to do, and it was an enormous cast, 30 people in the cast, whatever. So that's, it depends on the show.
So, what's the contrast between, Broadway when you first came onto the scene with They're Playing Our Song and My One and Only, and then now you were in Pippin just a few years ago. So what's the contrast between the two, other than, of course, computers?
Well, computers are a lot of it, all the computerized machinery everywhere. Um, you know, there must be something someone who's on Broadway right now would say. I didn't find it all that different,
Hmm.
to tell you the truth. I mean, at its core, it's the same work. It's the same rehearsal process. It's the same preview process. And and showing up at the right time. And, except for the fact that Pippin was acrobats and me hanging upside down doing a dance trapeze number, which was a whole other thing. But basically, I didn't notice any gigantic changes except the prices. The tickets for their playing our song were $12 and something. Can you imagine? And I remember when Liza Minnelli came to Broadway and they were going to do a show for Liza, and I was still on Broadway, and the word got out that she was going to charge $25 for her ticket. What? Nobody's going to pay that, Can you imagine? Now they're $300.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy, crazy, crazy. I don't know how people I can afford to go to the theater. I really don't. So I would guess the biggest thing I could say is what it costs to put a damn show together. It's just ridiculous today. It was $800,000 for their playing our song. And that was enormous because we had a turntable. What? We had a turntable, electric turntable, so they could. It was a two-character musical with three voices on each side, right? But only two-character musical. But the turntable, but it should never been used before that time, I guess, on the Broadway stage. And should be able to put one set in the back and the set that was being used in the front, and then they would just turn. So you could preset the back. You wouldn't have to have people running in and putting set. And the thing would just turn, and there's the new set. But I can't tell you how many nights it broke down, and they still had to run the stuff out, and then it didn't match what was in the background because they couldn't get the set to move, and
Well, and the amazing thing now is like you look at, Hamilton and Come From Away, and there's all sorts of Broadway shows, My Fair Lady, that have used it in recent years, and even high schools and regional shows can
sure,
build it without any hitch.
yeah, yeah. No, I remember that was really funny, and I remember one night Phil Kuzak, our stage manager, who's running this thing and running the electronic thing, and it's the first time he's ever had to do this stuff, and it stopped, and it was not couldn't get it going, and he's got his headphones on. I'm changing my clothes fast as I can, and I see him right next to me. He's going, two-character musical, my ass. It's like. Oh, he said, that's what he said. He said, a little intimate two-character musical, my ass.
Oh, that's funny.
Very funny.
So, your husband is Laurence Luckinbill, who's a director, actor, and producer. How did you guys meet?
Well, he's not really a director. That's not, he has directed one or two things a long time ago. Basically known as he's an actor. He's a writer. He just released his first autobiography, when you write an autobiography, I guess you only have one. He just released his autobiography called Effective Memories, How Chance and the Theater Saved My Life.
Oh, awesome.
Speaking of the theater, you should interview him. And it's a wonderful read. God, it's a great book, and it's doing really well on Amazon, Theater Biographies. And so he's an actor, he's an author, he's a writer, and a producer because he's produced his own one-man shows that he wrote and produced our Lucie and Desi home movie documentary that we won our Emmy for. And he's right now promoting his autobiography all over the country. And he's going to celebrate his 90th birthday in November. And he's a sprite. What can I say? Man is a walking miracle.
Well, tell him happy birthday.
I
And
will.
Congratulations on the book. That's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, you've been in a couple of shows with him. Did you guys meet
Yes.
doing Neil Simon shows?
We met when we were both in Neil Simon shows, but separate Neil Simon shows. So we met on Broadway in 1979. I was doing their playing our song, and he was in Neil's play called Chapter 2. And we met at Joe Allen Restaurant one afternoon with a mutual friend who I happened to be having lunch with, and I was about to leave, and she said, "Oh, stick around. I'm going to meet with Larry Luckinbill, who's, putting me into this show that he's doing, and he's going to help me, give me some pointers, whatever." Oh, okay. And he walked in, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's how we met.
And out of curiosity, because I know you've worked with him on a couple of shows, how does the cast and the group that you're working with on a show affect your enjoyment and your performance in the show? Because, like, My One and Only, you worked with Tommy Tune and Charles Honey Coles, and of course my dear friend Peggy O'Connell.
Yeah.
And so how does that core group of actors affect your performance and your enjoyment of a show?
Great question. Great question, Nate, because you can start off with a great group and think it's always going to be like this. Real friendly family, people, everybody helping one another, everybody there for the same reasons. And other times you get into a show with a company where there's just too much ego to
Hmm.
even walk through the door. And people seen stealing lines, blaming other people, causing all kinds of trauma. And I've worked with all of the above. Uh, it's always devastating. It always takes the fun, basically takes the fun out of it for me. And you got to get through it. You have to go to work every night. You have to deal with these people. But I do have a long list of stories of people who were just outrageous to work with. Just, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? How do you get away with this? How does anybody ever work with you? Um, and it's unfortunate because it spoils the experience for those of us who do it because we love it, you know? And I was not brought up that way. I worked with a team that wanted to see everybody on that stage do well. Nobody tried to steal anything from anybody else. You surround yourself with the best possible people you can because it's going to make you look better, you know? And but not everybody's brought up that way, and not everybody learned their craft that way. So it is debilitating. And for young actors, I can only say don't be one of them. Don't give in to that. Walk away. State your case. If they're abusing you or they're talking down to you, step up and say, I won't be spoken to like that. Talk to the director if that's helpful, or the stage manager, and say, there's some bad stuff going on out there, and I'm being treated very badly, and other people are being treated. Report them to equity. Report them to your principal. Report them to whoever that you know. First, you try to be diplomatic. You try to assuage everybody's fears, is what it's usually based on fear, right? People behave badly because they're afraid. That's almost always true. A friend of mine used to say, if it doesn't look like love, it's based on fear. So anger, resentment, sarcasm, putting people down, they're afraid of something. What is it? So there's a lot of that in the theater. And I think it's a side effect of the fact that most of us come from um, dysfunctional families to some extent. People who love to get up and perform like to be put into another body and see what makes us tick, because it sort of helps us figure out ourself, our family, or whatever we went through. It makes for good actors, but a lot of them are so torn in, combined in that they can't even get out to perform nicely,
Hmm.
and they're always just going to be missing half the fun, according to me. I just say that's really too bad, because you know what? This is a great business to be in if you're not all about yourself. I guess that's true of life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you were talking about music arrangement and composition earlier, and you have
Mhm.
a few upcoming shows at 54 Below.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
And your music is arranged by Ron Abel, who's worked with Bette Midler, Johnny Mathis, Liza Minnelli, and that's just to name a few. So, how'd you end up working with him?
Ron and I have been working together doing our shows for 34 years. Isn't that
Wow.
crazy? Yeah, I met him because I agreed to step into a charity show for a bunch of kids back in 1988. A friend of mine, Joyce Boulafont, asked me to step in because the kids needed somebody to front their production number, which was very funny because she said it's a dyslexic school I work with, and we're doing this big tap number with hats and canes, and oh my God, we're about to open in 2 days, and these kids they don't know their right foot from their left, and I went, Joyce, it's a school for dyslexic children, you know. But anyway, I agreed to do it, and she sent over her musical director to work with me to teach me the number, and it was Ron Abel. So it was 1988, and just the way I talked about accompanists, just the way he accompanied me, and his ideas, and the way he played, what he did with two hands and 88 keys, I had not experienced before, and I'd worked with an awful lot of people, and I just really Wow. And at the same time, I was given this offer to do an entire evening of Irving Berlin music to celebrate Irving Berlin's 100th birthday
Oh,
and to take it to Sicily. There was this outdoor place that was wanting to do this whole, American tribute to Irving Berlin. So I grabbed him and I said, "Would you like to go to Sicily with me? Do you consider helping me with this job?" And he did. And we put together a 90-minute show of Irving Berlin, some of the most beautiful music ever. And after that, we were getting booked here and there for like a year with just that show.
oh, really?
And then I had my concert act. Suddenly I had a nightclub act. And I would take out the Berlin and put in Gershwin and blah, 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 blah. But Ron and I have had this camaraderie, this kinship. I mean, there's only a handful of really great musical accompanists who breathe with you. They really know, oh, she's going to go there, she's going to go here. And I don't even know it. Like I'm just trying to stay present and in the moment. And sure, there's a melody you have to hit or whatever, but you can phrase differently. You can switch to certain notes here and there. And half the fun of singing is being able to make those choices on the fly. And he's always right there. He doesn't look at me like, "What'd you just do?" Plus, he's got a great sense for arranging. God, his arrangements are just out of this world. And so, yeah, most of the time I'm working with Ron, and it's been a blessing, just absolute blessing. He's one of the kindest people in the business, first of all, which helps. So when we travel together, we have a good time.
Nice.
He's not like a drag. I know a lot of very talented musicians, but you don't want to spend a lot of time with them. They're not that much fun. They're meant to be standing in the back, playing the bass or whatever. But they don't speak up the hang is half of a concert life, let me tell you. What it's like before and after the show is important.
So you were talking about working with students, and that's how you met Ron Abel, but you now have a regional award program for the Jimmy Awards named after you, the Lucie Arnaz Awards in
Yes, indeed.
Palm Springs, and the Jimmys just happened earlier this week. But what's it like to see your legacy inspire students through those awards?
When I was asked to have my name put on those awards here in the Inland Empire, we call it. It's Coachella Valley, Palm Springs, Riverside, Temecula, all these beautiful desert cities. I was so honored, but I was taken aback. I was like, really? I'm not famous, really, for musical. And then the guy went, "You don't think so?" And then he just listed all the shows I've done. I went, "Oh, well, maybe I am." And so I was very honored. And every year, David Green, who created this award with the Pantages Theater in Hollywood, because we had to have a sponsor to sponsor us originally. So it was the Pantages Theater, Marty Wiviet there, David Green down here, put these awards on. In the beginning, we had like 8 kids showed up. We did it at the Purple Room. It was so small. And then there were 12, and then there were 15. And this year we had like 39 kids, whatever it was. And they come from all around, all these different high schools in this whole area. And a lot of them have had very little musical training, but their schools have a musical theater department. They do put on plays, and they get to play these marvelous parts. So to work with them and train them and get them ready to go to New York and choose our 2 best from here and send them off, good luck. It's thrilling. It's really great. These kids are so talented. And I watched the Jimmy Awards this year. Did you? Did you watch them? Oh, it's just so inspiring. I mean, our kids were great. The 2 that we sent were so, so good. As soon as I saw some of the kids singing this year at the Jimmy Awards, I thought, they don't have a prayer. I couldn't believe it, because as good as they were, there were kids even better, like even better. So I was very happy with the 2 that won. I thought they were
they were fantastic.
Extraordinary talents. And the diversity of them too. They weren't the type that you would think would get cast 20 years ago in a Broadway show. They were character actors almost, and they were leads at the same time. Just fantastic. So yes, it makes me feel very, very good to give back. I love doing master classes around the country. I do that often with kids that age. And it's also just really nice to be a part of a program that helps keep musical theater programs alive in high schools around the country, because that's why the Jimmy Awards exist. We found that high schools were cutting arts department funding That's
Hmm.
the first thing that goes when they need to cut funds. They cut the arts. Why? It's crazy. I think that that's the one thing they should never cut. It's the one thing that really gives kids a sense of self and they can express themselves and get out all the ooga boogas, the traumas that they bring from home and their friends and growing up and,
Definitely.
just, yeah, the arts are the perfect way to do that. Even if it's just, playing an instrument or painting or singing, acting, whatever, the arts. And since these projects were being cut, a lot of very smart people said, they don't seem to cut the competition programs. They don't cut the sports programs, do they?
Mm-hmm.
There's something inbred in this humanness here, and especially in our country, that likes to cheer for the winners. So they made musical theater a competition throughout the country. And don't you know, they're not cutting music programs in those schools anymore. So that's what it's really for. It's not for any other reason than to continue having a way for kids to learn music and art in schools around the country.
Definitely. So every episode of the podcast, I like to play a little game with the guest.
Oh,
So
good. I like games.
if you don't mind, I would like to play a game of Would You Rather with you.
Okay.
So you've had such an extensive career, but actors have to make decisions all the time, whether that's, which shows to audition for, how to say a certain line. Decisions float in the back of actors' minds all the time. In this game of Would You Rather, you'll have to choose between certain aspects of your career and explain why. Does that sound
Okay.
good?
Yeah.
All
Hit
right.
it. Let's see if I can do this.
So you were, would who would you rather co-star with? Robert Klein, the comedian who you were on Broadway with, or Neil Diamond, who you were in The Jazz Singer with?
Okay, now you're going to get me in trouble. Well, they're apples and oranges. I mean, Robert, interestingly enough, when you say that, the first thing I thought of was that when I worked with them, neither one of them were really actors. Robert was a stand up comic who was auditioning for that part. And he had done like New Faces of 1964 on Broadway or something, but he wasn't known as an actor. He was a stand up. And Neil, definitely not an actor. He was a big monster mega
Mm-hmm.
hit, musician. So they had very similar problems working with both of them. And they were both wildly fun to be around as people. So who would I rather work with like now? I
Or
guess I'm going to go with Robert Klein just because now he's acted a lot.
the second question, would you rather be interviewed by a television news anchor or Randy Rainbow?
I did Randy Rainbow's podcast last year, I think. Yeah. And I don't know what I was expecting him to be, you know, crazy Randy Rainbow doing wacky stuff. He is so laid back and such a good interviewer. It was like just a sit around the couch with a, hot cup of coffee conversation. I love talking to him. First of all, I love his work. He's bright as can possibly be. And like he kind of does it all. He performs this stuff. He writes it, he performs it, and then he films it, and then he edits it, and it's a one-man band. So we love Randy Rainbow.
So the third question, would you rather be in only on or off Broadway shows for the rest of your career?
I can't answer that. I mean, I don't. That if this is an either or, you don't pick. I don't pick shows because they're on or off Broadway. I pick shows because the script is good and the part is good, and there are wonderful shows off Broadway, and sometimes wonderful shows on Broadway. It's the same work, and you're working 8 shows a week generally. It's the same amount of exhaustion. It's the same amount of triumph.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, smaller audiences off Broadway perhaps, but I've done some great shows off Broadway, and I would be happy to go to be off Broadway again. And yet, a Broadway show just means they move to a bigger theater. Sometimes they pay you more. So I don't know how to answer that, except if it was for a really long run, I guess I'd have to say a Broadway show
Okay.
because then you could actually afford to stay there and do it.
And then the fourth question: would you rather have a reoccurring role on Will and Grace or Law and Order, both of which you've made appearances on?
Law and Order. I like that kind of stuff. I mean, I did a Law and Order a long time ago, and drama is interesting, and Will and Grace was a one-off kind of cameo wacko thing. Uh, yeah, I wasn't all that happy with the way they did that show. I love the people who are in it. Just love those actors. But they taped for too many hours. They went through two different audiences and they kept them there for like the whole day.
Oh, really?
And they claim that they do their show like we used to do our show, the Lucy Show and the I Love Lucy Show, and a three-camera live audience. It's three camera, but it's digital and it's a live audience, but they sit there all day long and they redo scenes 50 times. I mean, they just keep redoing it and changing the words, and it's exhausting and horrifying. I would not want to work like that. So it's more about how they work than the people.
Yeah. So it's not like, um, I Love Lucy, the Lucy Show, where it's more like a stage production almost. They're retaping scenes.
Yes. Yes, it's almost like it's a one camera show
Huh.
because they stop and start and stop and start and talk in between scenes. But even in a one camera show, you usually have a script that is frozen and you're doing that script. And now you're just trying to do the setups and film it, set it up, film it, set it up, film it, right? This is like set it up, action, do the scene. Okay, now, you know what I'm thinking might be funny? If you hold a cup like this, why don't we try one where, and the audience is sitting right there. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, because
What
that's
are
what
you
rehearsals
doing,
are
you
for.
people? Exactly. That's what I kept saying. This is what rehearsals are for. So I don't know. They got used to that a while back. It got real sloppy. And I think their blooper reels meant more to them than the audience that they're asking to give up
Hmm.
their entire day so they can get their laughs. It didn't seem right. So for that reason alone, I wouldn't do that show or any show that films that way. Not
Hmm.
just because it was Will and Grace.
Yeah.
As I said, that show makes me laugh, and the people are lovely.
Yeah, Sean Hayes
I
and
don't
Eric
like the way that.
McCormack, they're amazing.
I would not. If I was given the opportunity to go back and do, and it's happened, where I was said to the, oh, we could do another three camera, sitcom type show. Would you do it? And I said, only if you don't do it like that. And they went,
Hmm.
what? And I said, no, we're not doing it like that. It's not happening. Scares people because it's like they don't want to work that hard. Oh, you mean we have to actually learn our lines by Thursday or Friday? What? Yes,
They should try being on
it's the work,
stage.
right? Yes, exactly.
And then the fifth one is a real doozy. Would you rather ice cream or frozen yogurt?
Don't make me choose, Nate. Frozen yogurt. Frozen yogurt. I like those frozen yogurt pops we can get now that are like chocolate chip things,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're so delicious. And I can't believe they're just frozen yogurt and not ice cream.
Well, thank you so much for playing along with me.
Yeah, you're just fun to talk to, my friend.
So now we have a couple of listener questions.
Okay.
So one listener asked, how did you forge your own path in the entertainment industry with such powerful and influential parents? Did you feel like you were destined to be a performer as well, or did you have other aspirations growing up?
I had no real other aspirations. When I was 6 or 7, I thought, like every other 6 or 7 year old girl, I wanted to be a nurse or a veterinarian or something. That was a passing fancy because I think the Barbie clothes came out with a little nurse's outfit that week. But I knew pretty early on that I liked getting up and making believe, make believe characters and lip syncing to musicals. And I saw myself in that direction. I picked a high school because it had the best musical theater department. And that might have had a little something to do with it because I chose the musical theater and stuck with that pretty much. Took a little detour, went on my mother's show for a while, got a good education, but also got right back into theater. And I think that's the only thing that my folks and my brother weren't in.
Hmm.
They were film, they were music, they were TV, and I was doing theater. So it separated me a little bit, and it's never going to separate me completely. It can't happen. Having well-known parents, no matter what business you're in, is often very helpful to get your foot in the door somewhere. Even if your father works at a big company and you want to go into that business, whatever.
Hmm.
It's great. Somebody say, I'm going to call my friend and he's going to get you a job. Well, that's fine. They might see you, but you're not going to hire you if you're no good. I mean, and that may only happen once for some teeny little part somewhere, and then it's like, bye bye. So you still have to be good, and you almost have to be better because they expect so much more when you've come from something like that. And it's hard. It's hard. You can't ever escape the prominence of somebody like a Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. It's not possible. It's possible for Liza Minnelli to escape being the daughter of Judy Garland because Judy died very early. She had a tragic life. She's not on television all the time. There are people who don't even know who she is, you
Hmm.
know? But with my folks, they're still on television. They're still being honored and they're still around. And it is hard on a performer to have a whole career. I've been in this business 55 years or something, and with credits that go on and on and on. I've never been out of work, and I've always paid for my own self. I never took any money from them. And yet, it'll say Lucie Arnaz, daughter of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, when I show up somewhere, or it's in a magazine, or it's thousands and millions of times. And you think, would it say that if I was anybody else? Wouldn't it say something like actress, if nothing else? Wouldn't it say, oh, star of pick something?
Hmm.
No, daughter of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. That's the shitty part. That's the only part that gives me this kind of a tick, because wow, how many years do you have to do? What do you have to do? What kind
Hmm.
of plays? What kind of, do I have to like hang upside down on a trapeze all the time? I mean, what is it that will get that to not be your moniker? So I don't know if that answered your question, but I tried to make my own path for myself, and I do lots of different things, and I keep on going because I like what I do. I'm going to keep doing it because I like what I do. And none of it's my parents' fault. Jesus, I mean, they did the best they could to give me, let's say not a launch pad per se, my mother in a way, but just support my passions from the time I was a little kid. Say, if this is what you like to do, how can I help? Without ever pushing.
Hmm.
They didn't say, don't go into this business like many parents tell their kids. They didn't say, go into this business. They just looked at what she interested in. Oh, well, maybe, okay, she likes to perform. Well, maybe we'll build a little stage in the garage and she can do that. They were very helpful in that respect. And they're not responsible for the fact that other people put them on a pedestal and put me through whatever it is I have to go through. They were good. They were the best.
And then the last listener question comes from Connor, and he asks, "How did you handle performing in Pippin and hanging from trapeze and all that jazz?"
That's a good question, Connor. Well, handle it. How did I handle it? I had to stay in really good shape. I had to eat well. I had to get my sleep. And I had to trust the process, as our lead acrobat told me. I wasn't trained as an acrobat. I don't have fear of heights per se, but I didn't know how to do any of that stuff that I had to do in that number. But I trusted them. I learned piece by piece by piece what to do. And I tried not to ever get ahead of a move. Like, don't think about it. You think about, here's where you sit. Then you grab the rope. Then you grab the other rope. Then you put your leg up. Then you put your arm up higher. Then you go. If I did it piece by piece by piece by piece, I would get to the end and it would be fabulous. And if I worried that, oh, I got to do this, then I would just freak myself out. I couldn't think about how high up off the ground I was. There were no nets, no wires, nothing like that. We just were up there, and this wonderful acrobat holding me by my pelvis, really, and upside down with my arms and out like a bird and all these things. But I learned how to do it very close to the floor. on a very small thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I only had a few weeks rehearsal and only a few 20 minutes a day. And I couldn't rehearse at home. So you only got what you got. And then you just got to get in there and trust that the guy who's working with you is more trained than you. And you do what they tell you to do and eat your protein, basically. And I loved every minute of it. I swear to you, I never really was frightened because I trusted them and I trusted my preparation. It's like when you know your part in a show and you know your lines, you know the music, you've rehearsed plenty. You know you've rehearsed plenty. You stand backstage ready to go on, you're going to get, flutters. But it's not because you're not going to be good. It's a wonderful guy said to me once, don't confuse nerves with excitement.
Hmm.
So sometimes you're just excited to get out there and do it again. And you know the difference because you can be like backstage, and then the minute you walk out there and there's that monster, that audience, those lights, that's a whole other thing takes over. If you're a performer, a whole other thing takes over. And you go, if you're ready. If you're stupid and you're not prepared, you don't know your lines, you don't know your music, you haven't rehearsed, you should be nervous. Otherwise, trust your instincts and get out there and bring your A game.
So I like to close off every episode with the same three questions. I ask them to everybody who's on, whether they be a set designer. I interviewed Scott Pask, who was the set designer for Pippin, or a composer, whoever, an actor. But they're the same three questions. So the first of what I call the theater threes are, what is your favorite musical?
Oh, again, I hate favorite questions because there's so many. Favorite musical. What's my favorite musical? Oh, geez. And people actually answer this?
Usually, sometimes they give me like a top three.
No, that's not really answering it though, is it? Yeah, it's a hard question. There's so much good. And if I say one, I'm going to say, oh, why did I say that? Because it's really depends on the moment. And I have favorites for different reasons. Favorite ones I was in, favorites because of what I accomplished. Like I would say Pippin because I love the message of that show. I love the message of that show. And I also loved what I accomplished by doing it. I'm so proud of myself. But I'm also super proud of myself for tap dancing with Tommy Tune in my one and only for 7 months on the road, because enormous amount of dancing, and I never considered myself a tapper, but I conquered it. I did it, just like the, trapeze thing. So I was so proud of that, and it's a charming, wonderful show. Seesaw, very first show I ever did. It's a great book and really wonderful lyrics and a fabulous part to play. Gittel Mosca, great musical. But then shows I haven't been in, I would say, my favorite musical is Gypsy. How can you not love Gypsy? Is a great musical. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Of course.
One of my favorite shows I've ever seen or been in. So I'm failing this question because I can't just name one or even three. Sorry.
No worries, no worries. That's I one of my guests one time flipped the question back to me, and I was like, oh, now I realize how hard it is to answer.
Right? It is hard to answer. And you know what? Why does there need to be a favorite? Like I get asked all the time, as you can imagine, what's your favorite I Love Lucy episode? And I go, why should I have one? Why do we need one? What's the point of that? And when there are so many episodes in that show that are funny. I'll bet you've forgotten half of them. They always mention like the top three. They mention Vitamin to Vegemin, and they mention the Candy Factory, and they mention Grape Stomping. That's it. Yep. And I went, no, what about when she walked down the stairs with the big, hat that was too big? This is one of the funniest shows she ever did. What about, when they were with Red Skelton in the train? What about, there's so many. So what's your favorite color? What's your favorite show? What's your favorite? It's always me. I always go, why? Why do I have to have a favorite? I don't.
Well, and with musicals and I Love Lucy, like there's so many that are just genius, so it's hard to pick one.
Agreed. It is Chorus Line, best music. Okay, that might be my favorite on so many levels. A chorus line. What's better than a chorus line? You could probably put that show up against all the others I just mentioned and it would still win. even though I love all those other
Hmm.
shows. But see, it took me that long to even narrow it down and remember how many great shows there are out there. Oh my God, a chorus line, duh,
The
right?
second question of the Theater Threes is what actor did you look up to and why?
My husband, Larry Luckinbill. True story. When I went to see him perform in Chapter Two, I didn't know him. I'd only met him one time at that lunch, and then I thought, I'm going to go see him do this part. I've seen this play, but I never saw him do it, so I'll go see it. And I sat there and I watched him work, and I just thought, let me be on stage with an actor that good just once in my life. Just so real and committed. He knew exactly what the character was. I believed every word that came out of his mouth. And I had been working with a lot of actors. I mean, I'd been in a lot of shows up to that point, not as many as since then, but I had worked with what I thought were some very capable actors, and yet I looked at this guy and went, never worked with anybody that good. So I have to say Larry, truthfully, yeah.
Very cool. And the third question is what advice do you have for theater kids or anyone wanting to get into theater?
Hmm, hmm, hmm. Wow. Be sure that's really your dream, you're really your bliss, because it's really hard to make a great living in the theater. People do theater and then they run off and do television, or try to get into the movies or anything to make a living, because it's really hard. And there's a lot of rejection. You have to audition hundreds of times and get rejected and then get a part. And they'll go, I had to audition 200 times before I ever got a part. They go, that's about average. It's rough. It's really hard work. And if it isn't something you just love doing, you're not doing it because you want to be a star, don't do anything in show business because you want to be a star. Because if you make it, be careful what you wish for. It's not all it's cracked up to be to get way up that high and lose your life, basically, lose your ability to go out and be a person by yourself ever again. There's, it's not what you think it is, and it can destroy you. Um, Here's what I would say to anybody who wants to do anything. I learned this just recently, and I swear to God, it's the most wonderful test to find what your soul's desire is. And I think you should be trying to do your soul's desire as much as possible, because then you'll be more happy no matter how much money you make. But this is a good question to ask yourself. It said, if money were not an issue, so you're not concerned about making money, just pretend money
Mm-hmm.
isn't an issue, doesn't matter. You have no fear. X out, oh, I'd be afraid to do that because no, there's no fear. You've already traveled the whole world, so don't make, oh, I want to go see, Paris. No, 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 no. And most importantly, you knew that you would not receive any recognition for this particular thing whatsoever. No recognition. What would you do with your life? What would you create? Isn't that a great question?
That is, yeah, that's fantastic.
Because that is your soul's desire, your heart's desire. That is what you came down here to do. You may not remember, but it is. And then the universe says, so even if you don't think you can't, I can't do that because for whatever reason, you say, make sure you do a little bit of it as often as you possibly can. Get your hands into it as often as you can and watch what happens. Watch the universe open up and give you more of it. And then you'll be happy, whether it's theater or whatever. And if you love theater like those kids at the Jimmy Awards the other night, the lady who came out made a great speech. She said, not everybody here will go into the theater, but being a theater kid, being in the theater, having that experience is great for everything else you do in life. It's great to walk into a room and know how to talk to people. It's great to have the, uh, self-esteem to take on hard projects and to learn things in a hurry and to work with other people. There's so much we learn when we learn theater techniques. But there's also ways to go into the theater that aren't about auditioning. You could be a casting director, you could be a director, a stage manager, of art department. There's zillions of ways to be involved with theater without that. And some of them are fascinating and less stressful too, and last longer. The people in the shows come and go, but usually those guys stick around. So,
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your insights. It was really lovely to talk to you. I appreciate you taking the time to join me here today.
I appreciate the offer, Nate, and I wish you the best. And your audience, everyone listening, good luck. Be kind to yourself.
Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me, Miss Arnaz. It was an absolute pleasure. You can get tickets to her 54 Below shows and the live stream of that show at the link in the show notes. And you can also find the link to her live album, Live at the Purple Room, from last year. You can find Miss Arnaz on Facebook and Instagram at Lucie Arnaz Official. Before we go, I'll let you know that TheatreQs is produced by Nate Wiley Productions and me, Nathaniel Wiley, featuring music by Joyheads. Joyheads is a Pasadena-based music group composed of Juan Gomez, Daniel Johnson, and Jeremy King. The song that you heard in this episode is A Real Good Time. If you like what you hear on this podcast, follow the podcast and check out our website, natewileyproductions.com, for a wide variety of content, from historical series to photo galleries and much, much more. Thank you so much for listening today.